Good morning. This is the second week of our July Sunday morning study. This is would have been on Theology Thursday, but we moved Theology Thursdays to Sundays. And we're doing a series called Honoring Your Neighbor's Faith. And last week we did the introduction. And this week we're going to probably take up all the time doing the introduction as well, a second week of introduction. And then we'll get to some more specifics. But I think you'll find this week's lesson curious, and towards the end I'm actually going to give you a little homework, okay? So last week, a few of you sent me some really thoughtful questions. Many will be addressed in the weeks to come. Some I was about to get to when we ran out of time last week. And you have to keep that kind of in mind. We do have a time limit each week. One of the elements of the Christian church's curriculum can best be described as what I heard growing up as witnessing. The responsibility to share the good news that we have in Christ with others. We do this with the hope that those who struggle and wonder will find their way home to God. So, for some people, the challenge of other faiths, of people with other faiths, is that they feel as if they are called to bear witness to these people. The question is not, should we do this? From my perspective, as a pragmatist, the question for me is simply this: does it work? And if so, how best does it work? As I mentioned last week, most of us stay within close proximity of the faith we were raised with, our childhood faith. We may change denominations. We may mess with the edges of our faith a little bit, but it is a rarity to actually change religions. And as you'll see, when people change religion, they just abandon it. Now, what I'm about to say is really only about myself. I can only tell you about my own experience. I did not, as an adult, do a compare and contrast of different religions. The faith planted in me as a child had already spread like kudzu by the time I was an adolescent, so I had no interest in any other faith other than Christianity. And I adopted Christianity mainly because the people I trusted the most, the people I loved the most, and the people who I knew loved me the most, found meaning in that faith. After a few years of practicing it myself, I felt what they felt about it. It was their example of faith that shaped me. The faith shaped them and transformed them, and it convinced me that it was the correct response to God. So to convert me away from Christianity, you know where you got to start, right? You had to first convince me that my parents were duped or malicious. And like I said, this is just my story. Nevertheless, I can imagine that for a Jew living in Miami, it feels much the same. People love you, invest their life in you, and they tell you that Judaism is the way to God. I can imagine that these folks have the same feeling. The Hindu that lives in India or Indiana has the same feeling. The Muslim who either grew up in Afghanistan or Atlanta has the same feeling. There is a parental bond that is connected to our understanding of our faith that is hard to break with words, arguments, debates, etc. Now, I've lived 56 years on this earth, and I've never seen a person change their opinion on a matter like politics with apologetics and arguments. I've just never seen that. A person holds a strong opinion about X. Another person argues that X is incorrect, and they lay down 30 years worth of data explaining why X doesn't work and that your position is flawed. And the person who they talked to about this and tried to convince that they were wrong, they didn't convince them of anything. It's like spitting into the wind. It's a waste. However, I have seen people change their mind on X. I mean, they held a strong position on X, and then not an argument or not an apologetic course or a debate, but then life happened. They had a real life experience that changed them. Their circumstances changed, and they saw this situation from an entirely different angle. Maybe they saw it from a hospital bed. And this new experience that had not previously been known to them changed their point of view. Thus, it is not likely on something more intimate to our spirits than politics that we are going to change our position because another person reasoned with us. However, we can change. When life introduces us to a new way of looking at things, when circumstances in life come at us in a new way, people often change. But it's not by the power of our persuasion or words. So as you can tell, and it's just one man's opinion, I don't think there's much chance that speaking with people of other faiths is going to do much more than make all future encounters with them awkward. Which now actually frees us up to ask a second question, and maybe even a better question. If that doesn't work, what will work? There is little doubt, I don't think, that we should practice our faith even as others practice theirs. I mean, we should live fully into our Christian faith just as others live fully into theirs. So, as life unfolds and circumstances change, there's a door that opens. A door opens so that we see, so that people can see Christ. Life does that. Circumstances does that. Not me or you. So the way we practice our faith is very important because people are watching. It's not evangelism like being a car salesman. It's more like evangelism like being an example. Our best bet, as I see it, is to be the kind of people who others look at and say, now, listen, look at them, watch them. I can see Jesus in them. They actually practice this faith. They are kind and generous, forgiving. They love people. They love all people. They practice the lifestyle of Christ. It's that model that makes a big difference when people see their life changes and they see circumstances happen to them and they begin to reevaluate where they've been and what they believed. They look around and they see somebody who is living into the fullness of God. I mean, if I had heard my parents preach this faith, but they did not model it, I would have never taken it up. I'd have never believed it. It's never been the preaching. It's always been the practice. The New Testament calls this the witness. I mean, I think we really mistook this word witness for a verb when it's actually a noun. You shall be my witnesses. That's the scripture. But oftentimes we read it like you shall witness. It's not something we do. It's something we live and are. Which leads us to a rather rough transition, but in a paragraph you'll know where I'm going. If there's a Wendy's franchise that is struggling, well, it could be poor management, it could be that it's a bad location, there's other factors, I'm sure. However, if Wendy's and Subway and Five Guys and Zaxby's and McDonald's are all struggling, then it's not location. It's not management. it's something fundamentally different. People are choosing salads over meat. You see, if Christianity in America was on the decline and other faiths were doing well, then we know what the problem is. It's us. But if all religions are struggling in America, that's an entirely different story. Let's first hear this story by looking at Islam in America. I chose Islam because it's a faith that we're not emotionally attached to. And so we can stand back with a little objectivity at the percentages that I'm about to give. But this is the trend inside Islam. In America, about a quarter of adults who were raised Muslim, about 23%, no longer identify as members of their faith. So they come and they're raised in America. They become adults. 23%, almost one quarter, as adults, abandon the faith they grew up in. Now, among that quarter, about 55% of them no longer identify with any religion. Five or six just walk away. And this is according to a 2017 survey, and I think it's on the screen in front of you by now. It comes from the Pew Foundation for Research. And everything that I'm providing for you statistically today comes from the Pew Research Organization, which you can find at pewresearch.org, and another one called the Public Religion Resource Institute, PRRI.org. And this is where these statistics come from. So, according to the 2017 survey, 55% of that quarter just walked away completely from any sort of expression of religion. Some, about 2 out of 10 Muslims, ended up turning to Christianity. And some, about another 21%, identify with a variety of smaller groups, including Buddhism, Hinduism, Judaism, so forth. So, Muslims leave their faith in America at a rate of 23%. So 2 out of the 10 that leave find a home in Christianity. 5 to 6 no longer practice or believe anything. So a Muslim parent does all they can to raise their kid, and their kid, when they become adults, 23% of them just walk away. And they have common reasons for leaving Islam. You're seeing that chart, I believe, now. And if you just looked at the bold print, you'd see that issues with religion in general, 25% of them that leave because of that. They just have a problem with religion. They don't believe in God. They don't like organized religion. But 19% leave because they have a problem with Islam. They have a particular problem with the faith that they're in. Now, in recent years, the number of American Muslims has been growing steadily by about 100,000 people annually. But the fact that the share of people who enter and leave Islam are roughly the same means that the group really overall does not grow much. About the same number of people who come here as Muslims, about the same number, a similar number, leave every year. So to wrap this part up, it is safe to say that people leave the Islamic faith in America. They leave at about the same rate as people leave the Christian faith. People sometimes do transition from faith to faith, but as these numbers reveal, they're actually 3 times as likely just to stop practicing the faith as opposed to leaving and going to another faith, which is causing people of all faiths, Christians, Muslims, Jews, Hindus, everybody is beginning to say, why is this happening? So let's turn our attention now and look at the current number in America for Christians. This, again, is from the Pew Research Center, the 2017 Religious Landscape Survey. And I want to orient you to the chart, if I may. The first line, which is actually above the years, indicates these results come from two different studies. The first is done every 7 years, and it's called the Religious Landscape Survey. You can see it was done in 2007 and again in 2014. But there's another survey that the Pew Foundation does, and it's a political survey, and it uses some of the same religious questions on it. And it's been done every year since 2009. So you can see that those two surveys are up here, and then the years go all the way across, okay? So look for the word Christian in the far left column. The earliest data from 2007 indicates 78% of the people responded to the questionnaire considered themselves Christians. So they got a questionnaire that was either by phone or online or in person. And 78% of the people responded to it as saying that they identified as a Christian. Now, bear in mind, this could be anywhere from somebody who comes to church 3 or 4 times a year, and they come to the Easter service, and they were raised in a Christian home, so they consider themselves Christian, all the way to a preacher, and everything in between. So 78% in 2007 said, yes, I'm a Christian. Follow that line all the way across to 2018 and 19. And you can see that that number has declined to 65%. That's a 13% loss. Okay? 13%. Where'd that 13% go? Look at the bottom now. Go down to where it says unaffiliated. You'll see it in the bold, I believe, on the left-hand column. The unaffiliated column in the same amount of time grew from 16% to 26%. So there's 10 of your 13% right there. Now, what is this group called the unaffiliated? Well, you're seeing a chart probably now called, in the United States, the number of religious nones or nuns. This is a group of people who are not affiliated. They are unaffiliated. They could fall into 3 different categories. They could fall into agnostic or atheist, or just, nothing in particular. All right? On this chart, you can see that it's charted by millions instead of percentages. And this chart represents a decade. And of course, this chart is only looking at Christians. I've already mentioned that Muslims, they lose 5 or 6 Muslims just leave their faith and go to nothing in particular, or atheist or agnostic. Jews, Hindus, this trend is affecting everyone. And you can see how its effect is on Christianity. You can see that Christianity has dropped, and this unaffiliated group continues to rise. So why is this happening? Well, first of all, I want these Bible studies or these studies to be interactive. So I suggest you do a little research. I'm going to give you a short answer in a second, but I really think you would learn a lot if you do your own research. And you can go poke around at the Pew Foundation, or in particular, I'm going to give you one place to go to. It's called PRRI.org. They have a lot of research on this subject, and they have a particular article called Exodus: Why Americans Are Leaving Religion. Go to this article and read it. Digest it. Do your own research. Now, the little tidbit that I'll give you is this. The reason Americans leave their childhood religion are varied and nuanced. To fully grasp the complications really demands your attention, not my words. But to end this session without a morsel of answer seems a bit cruel. So I'm going to give you a morsel of an answer. Among the reasons Americans identified as important motivations in leaving their childhood religion, according to the Public Religion Research Institute, PRRI, are as follows. 1, they stopped believing in their religion's teachings. 60%. That was their reason for leaving. They stopped believing in the religion's teachings. 32% said their family was never that religious when they were growing up. Remember what I said at the very beginning, how my family anchored me to a faith. This group of people didn't have anything that truly anchored them to Christianity. That was not a hurdle you had to overcome, was family connections. 32% said their family was never truly involved when they were growing up. And 29% said that their experience of a negative religious teaching about the treatment of gays and lesbian people is why they left. So there's 3 reasons why people have departed. So that's your homework for this week. We'll pick up here next week. Hopefully you will have read the article. And we'll pick up here next week with our continued study. But before we leave, we have to improve our religious IQ a bit. And just like I ended last week with trivia and some questions, I'll do the same this week. First of all is the word karma. I'd like you to tell me, what religion is the notion of karma attached to? I'll give you a minute. You're Googling it, aren't you? Karma, K-A-R-M-A. Well, Hindu and Buddhism for 2. There are others. You know, karma operates like gravity. It doesn't really need divine intervention the way it is designed. In English, if you kind of removed any sort of religious connotations, people are prone to say something like, well, what goes around comes around. Well, that's them talking about karma. And, you know, as I think about karma, I have to think to myself about something that Paul the Apostle wrote. He wrote, whatever a man soweth, so shall he reap. That sounds a bit like karma to me. Anyway, so karma comes from Hindus, Buddhists. That's where it originated. All right, African American Christian denominations. Tell me the oldest one. Oh, okay. Tell me the largest one. The oldest African American Christian denomination, I'm going to tell you the name. I'm just not going to tell you the year that they started. The year would be a little surprising. The oldest is the AME Church, African Methodist Episcopal Church. And the largest? The largest is the National Baptist Convention, which is 7.5 million. All right? Now, the final trivia question today is a multiple choice question. What is Ramadan? Ramadan. I'll give you 3 options, okay? Ramadan. 1, this is the Islamic word for law. 2, it's a month-long period of fasting practiced by Muslims. Or 3, it is a holy city in Southeast Asia where pilgrimages are made for the religion of Jainism. Ramadan. If you said that Ramadan was a month-long fasting experience by the Islamic faith, then you were right. All right. I hope you found this time together rewarding. You have a good Sunday. I'll see you next week. Do a little research, and we'll get back together. Bye now.